Hello and welcome to this lesson on histograms. This is the last lesson on histograms and it looks at the finding an estimate of the median, the quartiles and an estimate of the mean. If you want to pop today's date and the title and then pause the video while you have a look at the do now task. So the do now task says the table and frequency diagram, so the frequency diagram is here, show the ages of people living in a small village. Why is the grouped frequency diagram not representative of the data in the table? Well, we have continuous data here, and hopefully from our lessons on histograms, you notice that we plot frequency density up the side. Actually, they've only plotted frequency. Now remember, the downside when that happens is if we look at the ages between 40 and 60, this is our biggest frequency, our highest bar here. Yet when we look at this diagram, because the ages are unequal in width, this last bar, 60 to 100, looks like it's the biggest as it has the biggest area and looks like it should have the most people in it. So actually this diagram is not representative of the information we've got here. Just moving on, so if we look, remembering then from last week, a bar chart is when we plot the frequencies, which is in effect what they did here. So when this happens, so this at the moment looks like it should be the greatest bar, but when actually back on Hegarty, it was this one which was the greatest, and now when we plot frequency density up the side and the area is actually the frequency, this is a lot more representative of the data. So let's complete the table for the data we had originally and let's draw a histogram to show it. So remember, when we are drawing a histogram, we need to work out what's called the frequency density. And the frequency density is the frequency divided by the class width. Have a look back at your notes. So for the first frequency density, we work out 12 shared by 20 to give us 0.8. Remember, the class width is the width of the bar here. This one says under 20, and we know an age can't go below 0, so 0 to 20 would mean this class width is 20. So let's fill in the class width column first. So for 20 to 40, the class width is 20, a difference of 20 between these ages. The class width from 40 to 60 is 20, and 60 to 100, the difference is 40. Now let's work out the frequency densities. So it's the frequency divided by the class width. So 27 divided by 20 to give me a frequency of 1.35. The next one, 30 divided by 20 to give me a frequency of 1.5. And 24 divided by 40 to give me a frequency of 0.6. So if we actually draw this histogram, so the ages go from 0 to 100, and I have a scale here, it goes beyond that, but that's fine. I need to accommodate the values 0 to 100, and my frequency density, my highest one is 1.5, so I've got a suitable scale up the side to accommodate those values. So I'm going to have a bar going from 0 to 20 with a frequency density of 0.8 for my first one, then a bar of 20 to 40 with a frequency density of 1.35, and there's my remaining bars. So if I just bring up the diagram from the starter, so this was the bar chart where they plotted frequencies. Here is now the histogram. As the third bar contains the most frequency, the most ages, this one is now much more representative within this histogram. Remember, it's the areas we look at for the frequency, whereas when we just drew it here, it looked like it was this last one here, which is why we draw a histogram for continuous data. It's just much more representative of the information. So our success criteria for today, our bronze objective is to be able to recall how to find the median and quartiles of data. Our silver is to be able to interpret a histogram, And our gold, we're going to move on and look at how to estimate the median and quartiles of a histogram. Now this is tricky and does move into grade 8 and 9 work. Now before you complete today's lesson, it would be really beneficial if you have submitted and completed the Hegarty Clips for this week already. And they are clips 416, which is finding the median from frequency tables, and clip 418, which is finding the mean from a frequency table. These clips don't directly involve histograms, and the work that I'm going to go on to isn't on Hegarty Maths. So I need you just to try your best to follow the PowerPoint or this video recording. Have a go at the questions, but don't be too hard on yourself if you find them tricky. We will cover this back in lesson when we're all back together as well. So let's have a look at this example here. This histogram shows the distribution of heights of 400 daffodils in a greenhouse. Part A asks you to complete a frequency table for the heights of the daffodils and show the cumulative frequency. So this we can do from lessons that we looked at last week. Then we're going to move on to calculate an estimate for the median, to calculate an estimate for the interquartile range, and to calculate an estimate for the mean. So let's start with part A. So it asked us to complete a frequency table. So here's my frequency table. All I need in there is a height column, and the frequency column will complete the cumulative frequency after. So the heights are just what these bars are here. So my first bar 24 to 26. So I'm going to use inequality notation. So the height is going to be greater than or equal to 24 or less than 26. So my next bar, 26 to 27, I'm using inequality notation because if you think about here, 26, it can't be included in both of the bars. So this is why it's not equal to 26 here, but is equal here. So my next bar, 27 to 28, 28 to 31 for this one, and 31 to 37 for this one. Now to fill in the frequency, remember on a histogram the frequency is the area of the bar. So we need to do the class width or the interval width multiplied by the frequency density. So for the first one, 24 to 26 is 2. My height, my frequency density is 25, so 2 multiplied by 25 will give me a frequency of 50. For 26 to 27, so I've got a width of 1 here, multiplied by 50, so I have a frequency again of 50. For the third bar, I have a width of 1 and a height of 60. 1 times 60 will give me a frequency of 60. For the fourth bar, I have a width of 3 and a height of 40, so 3 times 40 will give me 120. And for the final bar, 31 to 37 is a width of 6 multiplied by a height of 20, again gives me a frequency of 120. So I've completed the frequency table for the heights. Remember from previous work, cumulative frequency is where we accumulate the frequency values as we go along. So the first cumulative frequency value will be 50. The next one will include heights from 24 to 27, so it's 50 plus 50. So I'll get 100. My next cumulative frequency includes these three here, so 50 plus 50 plus 60 to give me 160. My next cumulative frequency will involve these four, so 50 plus 50 plus 60 plus 120 to give me 280. And then my final cumulative frequency will add together all of the frequencies that we have, which takes us to 400, which is also correct with the amount it said in the question. Moving on then, let's have a look at calculating an estimate for the median. Now remember, when we have calculated an estimate for the median from cumulative frequency, we have halved the cumulative frequency, so this would be 200, and then gone up the cumulative frequency graph and read across. We could certainly draw a cumulative frequency graph and do it this way, but how do we do it without? So we want to work out where the 200th value is. So looking at our cumulative frequency, I have 50 values in a height between 24 and 26. I have another 50, so I've got 100 values so far up to 27. I want 200. Now if I add all of these three, I get 160. So the 200th value is going to be 40 values into this frequency here. So we could just say an estimate of the median is this group 28 to 31. If we want to be even more accurate, we can work out what fraction of the way between these two values it will be. Now we can do this as I'm going to show you now in probably a more complicated way. Also we could just look at the histogram and do it in a simpler way. I'm going to go over the more complicated way first, so bear with me. Then we'll look at the histogram and see if that can show you in a more simpler way. So as I've said then, the 200th value is going to be 40 values into here. So we have to work out, so 40 values into this group. So we have to work out this is a fraction. So this will be 40 120ths of the width. So the width of this is 3. So I need to work out 40 120ths of 3. So this is where 40 over 120 multiplied by 3 comes from. Now if you do that on your calculator, just reached for mine. So 4 120ths multiplied by 3 gives you 1/10 or 0.1. Okay, 4 120ths multiplied by 3. Actually, I've typed in 4, hopefully you notice that should be 40 120ths multiplied by 3, that gives me 1. So it means I need to add 1 on then to this 28, so I can work out that the median value is 29 centimetres. Now if you think that's quite difficult to think about, let's look at this. Let's go back to the histogram. Now let's have a think about this square here, which I'm just tracing with the cursor. This has a width of 1 and a height of 10. So the area of this square here is 10. So if I go down here, if I think about them, this area here is 10. And I'm just going to split all of the bars up with this area of 10. Hopefully you can see then this is 10. So this bar has got an area of 50. Let's complete in all the areas of 10 in then. Now here you spotted probably that I've missed these off just because these are half a square. So this will be an area of 5 here and this will be an area of 5 here. So this, remember, these are the frequencies and all of these values add up to the 400. Now remember the median value is the 200th value. So if I split these areas up, so I want to split at 200. So I've got 50 here, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I've got 50 here, so 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. 60 here. 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160. Now I want to split it so it's 200. Now we can clearly see here that then I need to split it here. So I've got 200, an area of 200 with the bars this side, an area of 200 with this side. So we can clearly see easier that 29 centimetres is the median. Now, however you did that in an exam, whether you did it the previous way by working 40 120ths of the width and adding it onto the 28, or whether you just showed it by looking at the diagram, you will be awarded full marks. So now let's have a look at calculating an estimate for the interquartile range. So the interquartile range, remember, is the difference between the upper quartile and the lower quartile. Remember, the upper quartile is 3/4 or 75% of the way, and the lower quartile is 25% of the way. So if I wanted a quarter of the way, a quarter of 400 is 100, so it'd be the 100th value. Now that's quite easy because if I look at the frequencies, 50 plus 50 is 100, so my lower quartile will be 27. The upper quartile is slightly trickier in that I need the 300th value. And my cumulative frequency, so up to here, is 280 values, and I want 20 values into this boundary, into this class width here. So I want to work out 20 120ths of this width, which is 6, and then add it onto the 31. So my Q1, remember this is notation for lower quartile, was 27. Q3, remember, is notation for the upper quartile. So as I said, I want the 300th value because that's 3/4 of 400, and the 300th value will be 20 values into this frequency here. So 20 120ths multiplied by the width of the bar, which again gives us 1, and then add it onto the 31 to give us an upper quartile of 32. Then to get the interquartile range, it's the upper quartile, subtract the lower quartile to give us 5 centimetres. If you are confused by this, let's have a look at the diagram as it's much easier to understand. So I'm again, probably should have taken the animation off this. I'm again going to put all the areas onto the histogram. So remember, all of these frequencies, all of these areas totaled 400. So a quarter of the way would be Q1, which is where 100 is. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So my lower quartile is 27. My upper quartile Q3, if I just count backwards, I want 100 this way now. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I can clearly see that I have to partway split this bar. And this is then my Q3. This is my upper quartile because this is 3/4 of the way. This was 300 of the area this way because 300 is 3/4 of 400, and then, or you could count back 100 from here. So then we can just see that the interquartile range will be 32, take away 27, which is 5 centimetres. If you are struggling with this, it will only be related to the very last question on the knowledge recall for this chapter. So please just try your best with it, and we can cover it again when we're back in lesson and all safe together. Last one I want to look at then is calculating an estimate for the mean. So please make sure that you've had a look at Hegarty Clip 216. Again, this doesn't relate to histograms, but it does go over the very important topic of being able to calculate an estimate of the mean from a frequency table, which comes up every year in GCSE. Not always related to histograms, but we could relate it to histograms in that to find an estimate of the mean, all we do is the midpoint multiplied by the frequency, add all of those together and divide by the total of the frequency. And actually a histogram gives us all of this information because all we need to do is the midpoint, well, the midpoint between 24 and 26 is 25, multiplied by 50, which is the frequency, which is this calculation here. And then we would add it to the midpoint of the next group, which is 26.5, multiplied by the frequency, which is 50. And then we do the same again. So 27.5 is the midpoint, multiplied by 60. This is this calculation here, added to 29.5 multiplied by 120, added to 34 multiplied by 120, divide by the total frequency, which is 400. So it gives me a calculation for an estimate of the mean being 29.6 centimetres, correct to 3 significant figures. So I've picked out 2 questions from exercise 18E. If you do print off exercise 18E, please bear in mind that this last number on the interval is missing, and I've added it onto the PowerPoint here. I wouldn't suggest doing any more than these 2 questions. I think this would be ample. for the amount of work you need to be doing. So this question asks you to draw a histogram. So you will need to work out frequency density. So frequency divided by class width. So 8 divided by 4 here. Work out your frequency density. Remember, you're going to have to accommodate values from 6 to 25 along the bottom with your bars, and then your frequency densities up the side. Calculate an estimate for the median. Try and look at the diagram, look at the areas of the bars and try and split them up to find the median. An estimate of the mean is just midpoint times frequency added to 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 midpoint times frequency, divide by the total of the frequency, which is 8 plus 18 plus 28 plus 16 plus 10. And then you've got an interpretation question at the end. If you want to have a practice at another question, then here is a similar one. This time you are given the histogram and asked to draw the table back, just like we did in the example. State the modal group. Remember, this will just be the highest frequency, the biggest area. Calculate an estimate for the median. Have a look at areas. So if you look here, this is 1 multiplied by 5. So this square here would have an area of 5. Think about it that way, maybe print it out and have a go. Upper and lower quartiles, you're looking for 25% of the way along the diagram, 75% of the way along the diagram, and then subtract them for the interquartile range. An estimate for the mean, again you find the midpoint times the frequency, midpoint times frequency, do that for all the bars, and then divide by the total of the frequency. Here are the answers if you want to then check them. What I then want you to do is I want you to revise over all of the work that we've done for chapter 18. So that is sampling, that is frequency polygons, that is cumulative frequency, box plots and histograms, and have your best try at the knowledge recall. Either print it out and submit it, print it out, keep it in your exercise book, and just let me know how you get on.